Why did it happen, we asked ourselves. When and where did it begin? We wondered as we awoke from the sickly sweet nightmare of being feminine. Instead of the supercalifragilisticexpialidocious experience we were anticipating, we felt fear, shame, humiliation, helplessness, alienation, and dissociation from our bodies. All these had penetrated the illusion of romance and security. We wept with sorrow for our lost and unknown selves. We've got the whole world in our hands. The year of peace is over. Our hopes for peace are still here. The work that will make peace a reality is still here. Suddenly we think about the UN End of Decade for Women in 1985. We remember the Women's Forum in Nairobi. It was a time and place when women from all over the world came together. The women at Greenham Commons stand together, holding hands, as they make a circle around the military base. We hold out our hands, we stand together holding hands, as we make a circle around the world. Together, peace.
Dance recreates a solemn ritual as it might have been performed by temple virgins who tended the sacred hearth flame. The second dance will be the invocation to the moon. The waxing and waning moon has long been a symbol of renewal, a constant, regenerative cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. This ritual dance is a modern interpretation using ancient symbolic dance moves. Nour Dounya dancers, in order of appearance, are Claudette Agostini, Elizabeth Carefoot, Janice Smith, Lizanne Fisher, Felicia Marios, and Kim Peckett. These dances demand a spirit of devotion and surrender to the great goddess, because we believe that a higher spiritual experience can be gained from a sincere practice of this art. Thank you.
the next part of the performance will be Sue McGowan and Carol Weaver. Sue McGowan has been in Vancouver for the last 6 years and is an active member of the Wiccan community. And this philosophy is very much part of her politics and her spirituality. Carol Weaver has just returned from England and Scotland, where she was visiting many goddess sites there. So, welcome Carol and Sue.
Good thing the dancers were first. While Carol's setting up, I'll just talk a little bit about the songs that I'm going to do. The first song is written by Ruth Barrett, and it's a song to the goddess Diana, who was a Roman goddess who kind of came out of the Greek goddess Artemis. And she's the goddess who kind of went and lived in the woods with the women. She's very independent, sort of gal. And the next song was written by Charlie Murphy, and it tells the story of the burning times. And many of you here know the story of the burning times. In about the 13th century, when the Christian church was growing, it began to kind of declare that anybody who was doing anything heretic or doing any heresy would be executed. And though the witch's hammer didn't come down until, I think, in the 1500s, the church was killing women and men and children who were living their lives and expressing their spirituality in relation to the earth and the goddess. And they were, in order for the church to rise and tower, they massacred an estimated 9 million women over that period from the 13th century to the 18th century. And it was the church that really called women in particular witches during that time because they worshipped the goddess, because they worshipped, or that they lived within the cycles of the moon and the seasons and the harvest and the planting, and they lived with the cycles of life and death, and there was not this tremendous fear of death that we have in this kind of dominant culture today. So this song talks about the burning times and when the church and the medical profession rose and started massacring people for their ways of life. And it's why I call myself a witch. This started in Europe and spread all through the world, and it's still going on today. I mean, peoples all over the world who have a spiritual practice that connects them to the earth are taken over by Christianity and other religions still. So it hasn't stopped. And I call myself a witch because I have European heritage, and that's what my grandmothers, that's the kind of spiritual practice that they had then. And in a way to kind of reconnect myself with the goddess and with earth and with me as woman and powerful, I came to witchcraft. And so here I am. I don't have a big enough nose. And I only ride the broom on Halloween. So, especially not on gigs. There's too much shit to go on the broom. So the other thing I might say before we start, a couple friends and I started doing a public ritual on Halloween, which we know as Samhain, which is from the Celtic tradition. And Halloween is the witch's new year. It's when we go into the darkness and replenish ourselves and go within and rest and do vision work and do a lot of powerful stuff. And so we're doing a Halloween ritual on October 30th. So if you're interested in that, you can talk with me afterwards, and there may be some flyers around to see some orange things back there. And the last song that I'll do was written by a man named Whittian, who is from the fairy tradition. And I'll help us sing along with that. Oh, lady of the glowing moon, And like a songbird in her hand, she has my heart enthralled, setting me free to fly the skies, the mother of all. Diana moves with strength and will to bend the arrow's bow, sending it true into the heart of all we see and know. For she is every woman born, the mother of all life. We must remember who we are. We now take back the night. Stars in the meadow circled near an old oak tree at the times appointed by the seasons of the earth and the phases of the moon. In the center of them stood a woman, equal with the others and respected for her word. One of the many we call the witches, the healers and the teachers of the wisdom of the earth. And the people grew in the knowledge she gave them, herbs to heal their bodies, spells to make their spirits whole. Hear the chanting, healing incantations, calling on the wise ones, celebrating and dancing strong. Isis is dark, Indiana, Hecate, Meter, Kali, Inanna. 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 There were those who came to power through domination, and they were bonded in their worship of the dead man on a cross. They sought control of the common people by demanding allegiance to the Church of Rome. And the Pope declared the Inquisition. It was a war against the women whose powers they feared. In that holocaust against the nature people, 9 million European women died. And the tale is told of those who by the hundreds, holding together, chose their deaths in the sea, while chanting the praises of the mother goddess. A refusal of betrayal, women were dying to be free. Isis is dark, Indiana, Hecate, Meter, Kali, Inanna. Isis is dark, Indiana, Hecate, Meter, Kali, Inanna. Isis is dark, Indiana, Hecate, Meter, Kali, Inanna. Isis is we'd like to invite you to sing on the chorus of this one, especially since I'm kind of sick and I don't know if I got it in me. But this too is a song about old ways of my European ancestors. And the man who wrote this is from the fairy tradition, which comes from Northern Europe. And it's called We Won't Wait.
To finish off this performance part of the evening, Moira Movanna is going to, at the beginning I talked about my purpose in creating this exhibit. Moira Movanna has been a very important part of that. It was her goddess, the goddess that's in the gallery, that inspired me. And now she's going to talk about her vision, what the goddess means to her. So I welcome Moira Movanna.
Thank you, Onni. I remember the beginning of all this, how many years ago? Maid in Hastings at Carnegie. I was doing a show upstairs, and Onni was doing something for women. It was the same month where we celebrate women. I wanted to say thank you, Onni, for your vision, for all the work you've done. Many people such as yourself wouldn't have been here tonight if it wasn't for her. Okay, just let me take a glass of water. I wrote something after the first day, and I shared it with Onni on the phone. She said to me, asked me if I would share it with you. I've never read poetry in front of anybody else, but so please. Before I read my poem, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Great Mother. The very earliest religious icons were about 6 inches high, naked women in advanced stages of pregnancy. They've been found all over the world, and they date back to the Neolithic times. The Great Mother is the term given to her, and at that time, the Great Mother was found in all nature, not above her. She was a part of all nature. At that time, divinities were allowed to be whole, as well as their human counterparts who later were denied this. Worship of her, as you have seen earlier, an example of, was sensual and erotic, and it embraced all that was alive. It's a very short poem. I really didn't intend it to be read. It's a very short poem, and I know sometimes short poems, they're gone before you really understand. Maybe you'll think about it later. My phone, just enough. The Great Mother. Within us all. Within all life. The healer. The Great Mother is back again. No useless fear for her. No, not for her. The Great Mother. She's filled with laughter. Filled with laughter. She knows her power. The Great Mother. All life is hers. I am she, and she is me. I am the Great Mother. Thank you.
When this evening began, I explained that my purpose, my hope was that this would be a celebration, that it would be a time and a place where we as women could honor our strength, our uniqueness, our intelligence, our creativity, and our empowerment. I hope that from the things that you have seen and heard tonight, you have some of that. You have gained something that you can take away with you to carry on to tomorrow and the day after that. And I again thank you for being here tonight. for taking part in this very special time for me, and for the other artists who have contributed their work to the exhibit. And now I invite you generously and joyously to continue to look at the art exhibit, The Great Goddess Returns. And if you haven't started looking at it yet, I invite you to start looking. Thank you.
I can tell you that that is a greatly enlarged version of little icons that were found during the Neolithic period all over the world. They were called at that time the Great Mother. At that time, women were allowed to be more human. Now, a woman must be more a Madonna. This, for me, was a great period in time. Really, someone at school was using this as a derivative design. It was my graduation year. I saw it, and I'd heard all this information about the goddess, powerful. I guess I'd studied a little bit at school. My graduation year, it just came to me. That's what I wanted up in the wall with all my pieces. I was talking yesterday about the fact that this interview, I'm an intuitive person, and that goes for the work I do. Something will come to me, and later on, I will understand why. And so it came to me. It was I was successful, I had graduated, and I wanted her there. Over the years, I have learned more about her. When I met Onni down at Carnegie, Main and Hastings, she was also up on the wall. I was telling her about a woman who was sitting underneath her across the gallery, and she was there, it seemed like hours. When I went later, I couldn't, what was she doing? When I went later, I saw these little, oh yes, here it is, you probably won't see it, tiny little cranes. And there was 3 of them, and I kept them. I talked with her, and maybe it was the next day she came back, and she told me she had gone to she belonged to the East Side Women's Center. She told me that this was her offering, and she was just all excited about the goddess. And that was my next learning, was that this is something that's really special. And since I have been a part of this show more fully, is that she is a part of my healing. That a part of me that was denied, a part of me that could not express itself because of shame, guilt that I have carried incorrectly because of things that happened in my life. Now, how do I say? Now they're gone, and she is here. I rolled out clay and then stretched it, so you get these marks here. I put it over sand, wet sand. First of all, I expanded the picture of the goddess and cut it into smaller segments that would fit into the kiln. Then I put the clay over top, waited for it to dry, biscuit at a low temperature, took it outside and smoked it, so you get this earthy effect. And originally it was just on the wall, just these pieces. It's more difficult to do that here. The goddess is a part of that piece, like the large breasts. It's a woman with a baby on one breast and a man at the other. And there are a lot of different things in there. Each time I show it, more comes out relative to the stages in healing I've gone through. Right now, what was a man's form, there's a snake running through that. To say that that externalizes the big secret that so many women I worked with, so many women I was in groups, sexual abuse groups, were talking about for the first time in their lives. That represents what society doesn't want to talk about. The battered wife, the sexually abused child. That's the big secret externalized. But it's not just pain, trauma. It's working through that. A cross represents change, pain. If you've experienced trauma, reevaluation, going over it time and time again till you get through it is a part of healing. So that is the trauma, you could say, that was there at the first stage when I was looking at it initially. And then as I started to see hope through my own healing, as I started to see that, yes, these things happen, but there was something I could do about them. One thing I could do about them was externalize the secret that a lot of women aren't allowed to do in our society. Just to speak up. It's not talked about, the sexual abuse. So that was part of my healing, to do that. As I say, later on I could see these things. The third day after is the title of the show. After the trauma, the third day after, the goddess working through the pain represents a stage in healing, which is nurturing my own, repairing my own inner child.
Goddess Returns has two purposes. The first is that I really wanted to create the idea of celebration and a place, a space, a moment in time when it was really obvious that women were coming together, women who were reclaiming their empowerment, and also men who were supporting them in that. So that's the overall goal. And the personal goal for me was the sense of I wanted to make a difference. It was really important for me to be involved with something that was meaningful. And this to me is the most meaningful thing that I can think of. It was also a place for me to use skills that I know I have now and to develop other skills, because that's part of growing and developing. For me, the great goddess is a sense of presence. It's not as though there's any particular face. It's not as though she has any particular form, because that's not how she comes across to me. It's that there is a presence so powerful that when I first when I first was at Carnegie Center in 1986 and heard about Moira's goddess, I didn't even see her. I only heard about her, that it was so powerful for me. I felt such a response that I couldn't let her go. And for me, the goddess, as I say, has no form, has no face. She represents things like peace, justice, healing, a sense of we as people caring for each other, a sense of we caring for ourselves, a sense of we being aware of the environment around us, the world around us, and making sure it's there for another 1,000 years. That's what the goddess is for me. All of that and more. And for me, I feel really pleased to be able to say, I think she's alive and well. I think she's alive and well in this room. I think she's alive and well when the women at Greenham Common stood around the base, holding hands, saying no to nuclear arms. I think she's alive and well when she was at the Women's UN Conference in Nairobi in 1985. I think she'll be alive and well at the UN Women's Conference in China in 1995. I think that she is alive and well in many places and many times, in many different forms as well, so that when Marcia Epstein, for International Women's Day in Calgary this year, composed a piece called Lotus Mattress, a memorial to the Great Mother, there she is. Many faces, many forms, and yet that is a representation of the goddess. It's been a very interesting process for me because I come to this exhibit as a Jewish working class feminist, as an organizer who tells stories. And this is a story. This whole show is a story. It begins with my poem that I wrote in 1979 called The Psychological Conditioning of Women, or What Have We Got to Lose But Ourselves? And it ends with my poem that I wrote in 1986, We've Got the Whole World in Our Hands. So we start with a sense of loss, and how I came to this is the last line of my poem, which is, we wept for our lost and unknown selves. I wrote that in 1979 before I had any sense of what was coming together in 1995, and yet there was still the sense of there was something that was missing. There was something that I didn't know what it was, I didn't know where it had gone, but there was something missing that was important to acknowledge, that was important to reclaim, and that's what this is all about. And I came to it, as I mentioned, as a Jewish working class feminist, so I had practice in organizing exhibits for International Women's Day. They were at Carnegie Center and also at the Vancouver Public Library. I also, with some other people, organized a Labor Day exhibit for a union that I was involved with, the Vancouver Municipal and Regional Employees Union. And they were stories of empowerment, because everything for me is telling a story. So they were stories of empowerment. Empowerment as women, empowerment as working class people.